sacred space and things like that. So, so welcome everyone, and I'm super excited to be here this morning as we continue our journey through Advent. I'm not quite sure how it came to be the third Sunday of Advent, but it is.
Yes.
It was like, that was fast.
Yeah.
You know, the whole season kind of, it varies every year of how it's laid out, and it seems like we got started pretty early on the whole Advent process, and I think part of it has to do with the Christmas being a Sunday itself. So we're getting through all of this, through the 4 Sundays of Advent, even before the winter solstice. So it's early this year. So when I was here on the first Sunday of Advent, we talked about it being a process and a season of new beginnings. And that it was very interesting that it happens at a time when the days are getting shorter and shorter, and there's more and more time in darkness. So we talked about that darkness and how we can focus on hope and faith to sort of light our way in those darkness. And we talked about actually looking at our own shadows in our lives, because they do tend to show up around the holidays, don't they? Shadows of grief and regret and things like that. And we talked about sort of bringing all of those previous selves along with us to where we are right now and leaning into hope and faith. And then last week you had Reverend Pamela here, and we talked together so that she was on point as to where I was headed, and I was able to watch her presentation. So she took everyone kind of even further and talked about this season of Advent as being a time of preparation, sort of preparing. And she talked about preparing your inner nest, your manger of what new life you are going to be bringing into your consciousness or into your outer life. And I really liked how she had that example, and she had a slide with a photo of the sweat lodge that she had done the night before. It was like, talk about a ritual that would really kind of energize that process. So it was great to see that. And then this week we are, I feel like we move into a space of discernment, a space of, we know we're preparing. It's like we're planting seeds. It's, you know, the seeds are kind of down in the darkness, the rich darkness of under the ground, and it's a time of discernment of what is it that we want to bring forth. What new life, what new baby in the manger are we looking to bring into our lives, into our consciousness, into our relationships, into our outer circumstances. So I think it's a great time this week to ask ourselves some questions about what is that, and around our desires, and that is linked with our power of love. And we've also been, for several months now, we've been following the 12 powers, and the 12 power that's always seated at this time of the year in most studies, and it is in the book that we've been following, and I hope that some of you at least are continuing to follow along with, is the power of life. And so that, you know, links perfectly with this sort of new beginnings, new life, and the color for the power of life is red. Interesting. Like Christmas red, you know? So, so we're going to be talking about today these aspects of love and life as sort of our guides in this discernment process, sort of our, you know, our spiritual guides, our angels that we can call, our ancestors that we can call as we're asking our questions of what is it that we would like to manifest in our consciousness, in our outer lives. So let's start first by talking about love. So love is something that we're very familiar with in our human lives, right? In our outer lives, we use that word all the time, and it might be, I love your talk, or I love, you know, this person in my life, or I love this particular thing for dinner. We use the word all the time. We know what it means. And I really always enjoy reflecting on the traditional Christmas story from the Bible because it's just so rich and there's so many, wonderful images there. Now, of course, in Unity, we don't take the Bible literally. We take it as it was intended by the ancient Hebrews. They communicated all of their values and their teachings through stories, through metaphor. So we look at it as a story. But there's all kinds of wonderful images in that story around love. And one of the things that I always find interesting, one of the many things, is how when you see images of, say, the Holy Family and the state, it's always very peaceful.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And it reminds us that that's a state that we can lean into, but it also reminds us of things that we forget, that even though the pictures that we see, or even, as you're driving along and you see like the plastic arrangement of the figures in the yard that's lit up at night and all those kinds of things, that if we really look at this story as involving people, think about it. So this was a married couple that, with a pregnant wife, that was required to travel cross country. And it's not like they had a nice RV or even a nice car. Okay, they're traveling rough, on foot, her riding on a donkey, sleeping rough, cooking out, and then once they get to where they have to go, there's no place to stay. It's and then they end up experiencing childbirth. Has anyone ever been through childbirth? Is that wonderful and serene? So the actual story, if you think about the human aspects of this story, we're talking about something that's pretty challenging and pretty frustrating, and could be a reflection of the most frustrating times you've had in your life, where things were messy, loud, painful. I mean, isn't that how childbirth, it wasn't all, I mean, do you imagine that in this story that the baby Jesus just miraculously was like,
just popped
here
out.
I am, I don't cry and I don't make dirty diapers. No, these were people. This was, I mean, and if you think about the worst moments of your life, it's like, well, that was all present for the humans in that story, all of those human kinds of things. So it's not that far away from the lives that we experience. And it reminds us. So when we see the peaceful little, images on the Christmas cards or wherever, it reminds us that there are moments of peace. And that was a lot of what last week's message was about, was finding those moments of peace, cultivating those moments of peace. And another aspect as we move into looking at love. So once you've got the birth of the baby, but then further on in the story, you've got the whole crowd showing up,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. All the visitors.
So and then you look at the array of humans and animals all being together peacefully. And we're talking about royalty from across the world, who have been traveling for months and months and months following a star to find this space. So we're talking about people of different cultures, people of different levels of, affluence, different languages, all, babies, animals, all of these things coming together in a peaceful way, in a loving way. So does that have anything to do with our lives right now? I mean, right now the outer world is displaying with all kinds of polarity and extremes, and yet here's this story one more time coming around every year to say what we're really aiming for here is, no matter what your point of view is around something, that we're able to come together, that we're able to not just sort of be in a state of tolerance for people who are different or think differently, but to actually embrace those differences and to come together in a way that honors everyone and honors everyone's path and all of those things. So there's a lot of richness in just looking at the little, picture of the Holy Family and the shepherds and all of those things. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. And we can also, so we've been talking about sort of outer expressions of love that we can recognize. We also talk about in unity our power of love. And our power of love is beyond how we interact and show up in our human lives. It's where we are in consciousness. So our power of love has to do with the magnetizing energy of our divine nature, where we draw ourselves to circumstances and relationships and things that we desire. It's a sense of harmonizing, so finding a way to come together peacefully when things appear to be out of sorts, and unifying. So those are aspects of the power of love. So for this week, which I think is a great time of discernment, it's a great time for you to ask, what is it that you want to draw yourself to? What, and this doesn't have, we have a tendency to automatically lean into physical outer things. Your brain goes, oh, here's a question. I want to dive in and find some answers. I would like, to, go to the movies on Tuesdays, and I would, but what we're talking about is your thoughts, your feelings. What kind of environment of consciousness would you like to move yourself into in this opportunity of new beginnings? What in your life, because the power of love has to do with harmony, what aspects of your life, your relationship, is seeking to be in more harmony? What would you like to, and what things would like to sort of come together and become? What little pieces that, of your puzzle, of your life, or the things you're involved in, is it time to pull those together and unify? So one of the things that we always want to remember when it comes to when we talk about love and the power of love, is that there are just two places in the Bible where God is defined, and at one place it is defined as spirit, and the other place is defined as love. So what's important for us to remember and recognize is that as we recognize this energy of love happening in our life, even if it's as simple as I love my cup of coffee, that energy itself is what we call God. And each and every one of us is an expression of that. So it's not something out there that's far away. It's there it is. So even as simple as engaging with your pet, if you have a pet that you love, family members, but those moments where it's like to take a breath and realize that energy, that is what we call God. That's it right there. And we're all a part of expressing it and guiding it and being it and doing it. So one of the things that we talk about when we talk about the 12 powers is that they kind of don't stand alone out there and say, I am love. They partner together. And so we're looking this week at how love partners with the power of life. So we've already talked about the power of life. The color is red, and which is great for Christmas, right? So in the book Divine Audacity, if anyone has looked at that, she uses 3 different kind of avenues that she pursues around the power of life. She talks about animation, so bringing life to something that might be, sort of sitting and incubating and waiting. So animating something. Vitality, so it's like with our intentions, with how we show up, we sort of feed our circumstances, our thoughts, and that energy of feeding something, bringing vitality to things. That is the power of life. And presence, just being present and the energy of our presence. So that energy that sometimes we call God, sometimes we call the power of life, is always expressing. So it doesn't matter if you've had a bad day or if you've had a difficult conversation or anything like that, it's still there, it's still expressing. We can shift our awareness of it, but it's always there. And it shows up in surprising ways. One of the most wonderful ways that I can remember in recent years is in 2020, when basically everybody was in lockdown.
Right.
And I can remember being in my home office, spending, yet again another day on the computer and interacting on the computer because that's all we could really do, and ordering my groceries and having the bags show up at the front door and that kind of thing. And outside my window, spring was just going crazy. The plants didn't care. That energy of life, the flowers, the flowering trees, the bushes it was the most spectacular spring that I had noticed in years and years and years. Because it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic or whatever's going on that might be difficult in your life that keeps you from doing this or that. It's like that energy of life just happens. It just bubbles up. There's no limiting it. So that was a great example that I remember. And if you think about the worst circumstances that you've ever been through after a loss of whatever sort it is, and there's only so long that you can cocoon and, at some point, and it might be your body saying, get up. It might be that your heart is still hurting, that your head is still, but your body's like, come on, let's get up and do something. And so it's always bubbling up, no matter how dire things look. And we see that also with tragedies and events that, that perhaps we might see coverage on television or something like that. You can always see that spark of love, that spark of life that's coming up through that, even in the worst of circumstances. And the power of life is where the whole aspect of healing and wholeness is located in all the 12 powers. That's where our physical healing, and I think the greatest example that you can have is, and the most simple is, you think about it, if you cut your finger, do you have any worries about it coming together and healing? You might wash it off, put a Band-Aid on it. Is it gonna sort itself out? Because it knows what to do. The cells in the body know what to do to come back together. If it was bad, it might be a little scar or something, but it just knows what to do, and that is the power of life. Now, when we have a more complicated situation in our lives, we can get in the way of that by worrying and all those kinds of things, but our body knows what to do because that power of life is constantly just kind of bubbling up with wellness and vitality and all of those things. And it just happens, whether we're having a bad day or we're angry with someone or whatever, it just happens. And so just like when we talk about the energy of love, that energy of life, that vitality bubbling up through whatever circumstances, that is what we call God, the energy of the universe. So as we weave together all of these themes of Advent, there's a really strong message that shows up for me, and it shows up in the teachings of Jesus in some very clear language where he says, do not judge by appearances. He doesn't give you a bunch of examples about maybe on Tuesdays or maybe when it comes to your grandchildren. It's like, do not judge by appearances. And that is showing up through all of this too. So even when things are appearing to be dark, when there's, not enough daylight to get the things done that you want to get done before you want to get home and not be driving around in the dark, that hope and faith are there, even when things appear to be dark, that new life, new energy is bubbling up no matter how things appear in the outer. You might say, I don't have enough of this, we don't have enough of that, and yet it just happens. So even when things appear to be barren or dead, life is still expressing. So I think the last time I was here, I told a little story about a time when I was living out on a dude ranch in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
I told a story about that, about the dark. And so I have another story from another visit. So this would have been, it was, I guess it was our honeymoon trip after my husband and I were married in 1987. And we did a honeymoon trip where we drove all the way out to Wyoming, see my grandmother, go to, as she called it, the park, and then loop around and come back. And the park is Yellowstone.
Yellowstone.
So I think, you know, I don't know how many of you have experience with being out west, but forest fires are sort of a part of the natural cycle, the natural cycle that happens all the time. And there are, you know, lots of different theories about how to handle it or whatever, but the dominant theory, at least around the park, is that you let these things happen and you know, protect people and structures as you can. And that summer when we were going through the park, there was a pretty large swath of the park that had burned. And just and it was safe enough at that point to drive through. And it was, you know, a stunning, a sobering moment to just see just charred landscape. And yet, when you looked closer, there was the new life popping up all around, all around. And it's part of the natural cycle. So the burned, you know, all of the burnt, that gives nutrients, and then, you know, new plants start coming forward. So even when things look really bad, that energy of life is still coming forth. So these natural rhythms in the natural world, they kind of guide us through this part of the year when the days are getting shorter, the nights are longer, and the solstice, you know, really kind of brings us to the crest of that. And then it's like we know that after that, the days are going to start getting longer and the nights are going to start getting shorter.
Yes.
So as we think about these elements of love and life, we can lean into that through the next week as we kind of continue to go through this process and look at it as a period of discernment. So I encourage you to think about what do you want to give life to? And this could be a new attitude, a new way of being, a new circumstance. What do you want to give life to? Because you're in control of how you use your power of life and how aware you are. So like the baby Jesus in the manger, what new beginnings are you open to welcoming into your world? The preparation for all of this started all the way back in November when the power was released, and we were asking, what are you willing to let go in order to embrace something new? So if you didn't get that homework done, it's not too late. You can still work on it now. If you haven't done that, if you're still sort of hanging on to attitudes, beliefs, items around the house, sometimes this is a great time of year as you're like, you know, if you're bringing out holiday decorations to go, did I really need to keep this?
Right.
So maybe it's a good reminder, like, okay, what do you need to be willing to let go of so that you can embrace something new? Because there's opportunity present. So the Christmas story reminds us of the magic that can be present even in our daily lives. So I encourage you to lean into love. See love, no matter what the appearances are. Sense that energy of divine love. And even if your brain is not able to see it, then choose to be it. in whatever circumstances you're involved. Lean into this power of life and see the little bloods of new things coming up, no matter what the appearances are, no matter how raised the landscape of a relationship or a circumstance seems to be present to the new ideas coming forth, the new opportunities. And if you're not seeing it, if you're looking and you're not seeing it, then maybe you can choose to be the energy of something new for yourself, for others, and bring forth something wonderful for this holiday season. So we're going to take all of that and move into some time of meditation. So I'm going to turn the lights on.
Oh, thank you.
And it's okay if you doze off, that's all right.
Chris.
Don't worry about it.
Jesus. Oh. That's beautiful.
All right, so let's take a couple of deep breaths together. And like I said, don't worry about it if you nod off. I'm always a fan of whatever you're conscious to in your human brain, that's what you're meant to hear. And if you nod off, that's all right too. So just take a few deep breaths. Let's settle into this moment right here, right now. Just setting aside all of the things we've been thinking about and talking about, and just come to this moment in your body right here. You can help to do that by just focusing on your breath and the motion of your breath in and out. And in this space, this sacred space that we create together, let us bring these ideas of love and life, these divine ideas, and claim our capacity to see the love, to be the love, to see the vitality of life coming forth, and to guide that and be that in wonderful ways in our life and circumstances. Let's just take those two ideas and move into the stillness together right now. Let's begin to bring our focus back to this moment, back to the breath. Bringing to mind once again this idea, this divine idea of love, and recognizing our capacity to be a beacon of love in our life, in our circumstances, and through our thoughts and prayers as we share our energy of love out into our communities and out into the world. And likewise, let us recognize this divine capacity for life, this healing, regenerating, vitalizing energy present in our own bodies, present in circumstances that we are holding in prayer in our communities and in our world. And for all of this, we are grateful, grateful, grateful. So let's come back into this room right here, right now, with a smile on our face, as we experience the joy of working through this process of Advent and being grateful for these elements of love and life. So if you would, you can say with me, you can choose to if you want, or if not, you can just listen. I have an affirmation for us. Using love and life as my guides, I am grateful. Going to say it with me? Using love and life as my guides, I am grateful. And so it is, my friends.